So the argument from the Federalist Society, the anti-abortion right, at least some of them, for overturning Roe v. Wade was and has been that Roe wrongly took the issue of abortion rights away from the people, and that the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe then returned the democratic process to its rightful place and to the people in the states. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, in his concurring opinion, stated that argument quite simply. He wrote, the Dobbs decision, quote, properly leaves the question of abortion for the people in the democratic process. Through that democratic process, the people and their representatives may decide to allow or limit abortion. Now, as poll after poll has shown, the people aren't that interested in bans on abortion, the kinds that have come in the wake of the Dobbs decision. Abortion bans are really incredibly unpopular. And so Republicans and conservatives have been using all sorts of increasingly anti-democratic subterfuge to have their way on banning abortion over the objections of the majority of their own voters. Take North Carolina, for example, right? Republicans in the state legislature recently gained a supermajority when this woman, Tricia Cotham, a Democrat who ran on abortion rights and co-sponsored a bill to codify Roe in the state's constitution, inexplicably switched parties. And she gave them a supermajority, and then conservatives and Republicans then used their new veto-proof supermajority to pass an abortion ban in North Carolina. Over the objections of the electorate, it polled pretty poorly, and over the veto of the governor, who's a Democrat and was democratically elected statewide. So that's North Carolina. Now, here's what's happening in Ohio right now. That state's 6-week abortion ban is currently tied up in court. Its 22-week ban is still in effect. There's a coalition of organizations that are currently collecting hundreds of thousands of signatures to put the question of a constitutional amendment to enshrine reproductive rights in the state's constitution on the ballot in November. The people, right, voting. Or, in Justice Kavanaugh's words, to leave the question of abortion for the people in the democratic process. Similar efforts to support abortion rights have been very successful, even in states that are pretty conservative, like Kentucky. And Ohio Republicans and anti-abortion activists know this. So what they're trying to do is take the decision out of the hands of the majority of Ohio voters. They introduced their own constitutional amendment that would raise the ballot initiative threshold that has been in place for, get this, over 100 years, from a simple majority of 50% plus one to 60%. And Republicans are now trying to do this and get it done before that pro-abortion rights constitutional amendment can get on November's ballot. Meaning they want to put their own anti-democratic proposal up for a vote during a special election in August. Even though Republicans in Ohio themselves recently passed a law outlawing the majority of August special elections, not to mention a bipartisan group of Ohio election officials formally voted to oppose the Republican bill because they don't want to run a statewide election in August. The Republicans' play here is being challenged in court. But it's clear what's going on here, right? A maneuver designed explicitly to motivate hardcore anti-abortion proponents to come out in the dead of summer in a low turnout election so then they can move the goalposts and make it nearly impossible for a simple majority of Ohioans to decide to secure abortion rights in their state. No one has been chronicling this movement of anti-democratic, anti-majoritarian politics in states more than David Pepper. He's the author of Laboratories of Autocracy, A Wake-Up Call from Behind the Lines, and the new book, Saving Democracy, A User's Manual for Every American. He's also the former chair of the Ohio Democratic Party, and he joins me now. Good to have you here.
Great to be with you, although it makes my blood boil to hear that summary.
It is really, it's almost, I mean, it's not comical because the stakes are high, but it's so, the sort of manifest pretext behind the whole thing always just strikes me.
It's outrageous. I mean, the whole sequence. And keep in mind, this legislature itself is the result of multiple violations of Supreme Court orders that this map is itself gerrymandered. So their legitimacy is already in question.
Right.
This is an unconstitutional map that led to these guys in the first place. So we're piling lawlessness on top of lawlessness over and over again. And this is what you get when that happens.
Right, because it's one of these states, it's not quite as bad as Wisconsin, North Carolina, but it's in the ballpark where you've got a state that's it's a pretty Republican state at this point. It's a +7 state, +8 in presidential elections. But you've got enormous majorities, right, in both houses because they set those gerrymanders.
They would not have had the votes to approve this measure a couple weeks ago without the illegal gerrymander they're living within. So that's just one other level of lawlessness.
So they've got the gerrymander, and they use that supermajority to put this on the ballot. they're going to put this on the ballot. Are they honest about why they're doing this? Like when they give the argument for why suddenly it has to be a 60% threshold.
No, it's a joke. I mean, they're saying they need to protect the Constitution. For the first time in 100 years, they have to protect the Constitution months before what you just described, a citizen-led ballot initiative to actually have the people vote on abortion access. By the way, when the Supreme Court came out with that opinion, it was gaslighting from the very beginning.
Sure, yeah.
They know that most of these states are gerrymandered. They do not reflect the people. Kansas showed that with its referendum last August. And these legislators know it. That's why every poll in Ohio shows that about close to 60%, and that's why that's such an important number, close to 60% of Ohioans support Roe v. Wade in general abortion access. Almost none support abortion bans, no exceptions, that sent that 10-year-old girl to Indiana who was raped. These guys know that, and as you've described, it's so blatant. They're moving the goalpost. But let's be clear. Now, I hope this comes out this way. I'm not sure it will. They themselves made a special election in August illegal.
Right. So
and they did not revoke that law.
Okay. So this is another great layer on top of this. So basically, they're on this race, right? They see the abortion rights advocates are going to get this ballot initiative in November.
Right.
So they're like, well, we want to raise the threshold to change the rules of the game before they can get there in November. So we have to have our election here in August.
Correct.
The dead of August, right? Now, the county election officials, a lot of whom are Republican, are like, what the hell are you doing? We don't want this, right? But they already passed a law saying you can't have special elections in August?
Yeah, and they tried to get the votes to repeal that law, but they didn't have the votes, so they just stopped trying to repeal it, and they're just saying we should have it anyway. By the way, the Secretary of State announced to those elections officials months ago the great victory of getting rid of these August elections. It was a bipartisan victory. The author of the August election idea himself said this was a career-long goal of mine to get rid of August elections. Months later, they can't repeal it, but they still demand an election on a date where it's currently illegal to have a statewide special election in Ohio.
So this is where we get back to these sort of layers of anti-democratic. So that challenge to the legality of this August 8th election is going to go to a state.
It's the Ohio Supreme Court.
And how are we doing over in the Ohio State Supreme Court?
Unfortunately, we had our Wisconsin moment a couple of years ago. We actually got ourselves an independent court.
Right.
Then they changed those rules and added party label to the ballot, moved those races up to the top, and now they have themselves.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
right.
There's another one.
The court changed hands.
It did. We had a moderate Chief Justice who was a longtime Republican who, with 3 Democrats, voted against every gerrymandered map. But in the meantime, they switched the rules of how we elect justices, like they did in North Carolina, and then violated for a year all the court orders. As I always say, if we saw this in another country, we would be saying, my God, you have no rule of law. Well, that's Ohio right now in 2023.
And it's not just Ohio. I mean, we have seen similar stuff happen in Wisconsin. We've seen it happen in North Carolina. There's proposals in Missouri right now. I mean, your first book, which I read and is excellent, really does a really good job of talking about this. I mean, the flip side of it, which I think has been somewhat successful in Ohio, is there really has been mobilization by voters and Ohioans to be like, this is not okay.
It reminds me of 2011, the anti-collective bargaining bill that we rescinded. Right now, you're seeing it's just so over the top. It's so blatantly dishonest. And you even have, former Governor Taft, who was a former Secretary of State, John Kasich, former Attorney General, all saying that this is outrageous. So I hope that we're seeing a bill. The Libertarian Party came out against this. It's very conservative groups who themselves want to bring things to the ballot are saying this is too much. So my hope is that, and by the way, one other thing, backdrop. This is the most corrupt state house in the country, according to the FBI. The Speaker of the House, who had to resign, will be sentenced in June for the largest bribery scandal in the history of Ohio. So this is against the backdrop of corruption. That trial is still playing out. And so a state house normally would respond with reform, but they're responding, grab more power from the voters, more power from themselves. So my hope is there's enough of buildup that we crush this thing in August. And one of the things that's really important here is if this passes in Ohio, they do operate as laboratories of autocracy. Let's be clear.
They'll do it
Other
everywhere.
States will do it. So we can all do the country a favor.
Make
exactly.
It 80. I mean, right. I mean, this
so
is
crush it in Ohio. So the billionaire, there's a big Illinois billionaire backing the whole thing.
Is Browner? Is this?
I don't remember. His name is Uline or something.
Oh yeah, the Uline.
Uline.
Yeah.
I want him to feel like this was such a monumental waste of money. It's not worth doing anywhere else. It's too much. It's too much of a power grab. And that's, again, if this passes, it's coming everywhere that they can do this. If it fails, then I think we make progress beyond Ohio. It's that important.
All right, David Pepper, whose new book is called Saving Democracy, a user's manual for every American, out now. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks. Great to be with you.